Today I'm going to read and sort of go over an essay called The Santa Ana Winds by Joan Didion. This is another essay that has to do with the topics we've been looking at and discussing in our online course so far, which is nature, the nature of the human mind, the relationship between humans and nature, things of that sort. So without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to pause and again discuss here and there things that will help you when you're completing the assignment for this essay. So maybe take some notes. I definitely recommend, again, having the essay printed, having a pen or pencil with you as we go through, just so you can jot down some things that I say that might be helpful for you when you get to the assignment. So here we go. There is something uneasy in the Los Angeles air this afternoon, some unnatural stillness, some tension. What it means is that tonight, a Santa Ana wind will begin to blow, a hot wind from the northeast winding down through the Cajun and San Giorgiano passes, blowing up sandstorms along Route 66, drying the hills and the nerves to a flashpoint. Pause. So we have again an urban setting, like the piece by Annie Dillard, right? That was a suburban or urban setting and she was going out into nature. So kind of a similar setup, just a coincidence, just, something that these pieces have in common that I'm pointing out. This is a great example of something that I saw a lot of you guys were a little bit confused about, maybe syntax, syntax, syntax. That is basically the sentence construction that has meaning, that was done on purpose. So of course, all sentences have meaning. Nothing is like extra or just because, but that the form of the sentence itself is doing something to enhance the author's purpose, the author's tone, or it connects directly to the subject at hand. In this case, we have probably two out of those three, things that the syntax might be doing. So this sentence in particular, right? I'm going to read it again. This sentence in particular, what it means is that tonight a Santa Ana, a type of wind, will begin to blow, a hot wind from the northeast winding down through the Cajun and San Giorgiano passes, blowing up sandstorms along Route 66, drying the hills and nerves to a flashpoint. Okay, that cumulative sentence that collects details as it goes mirrors the movement of the wind, which is collecting momentum as it moves, right? So we see, comma, this detail, comma, then it'll do this, comma, then it'll do that, right? That long cumulative sentence is mimicking the wind itself, how the wind itself moves. So that's kind of artful, right? So when we're talking about syntax, we're talking about sentence structure that has some art to it that's enhancing something in the text. In this case, it's mimicking literally the topic being discussed, which is the wind, the movement of the wind. It mimics it. And it also is working to create this tone of reverence or awe that the speaker has for the wind, right? So we can see that this is something that she's tracking, she's curious about, she's following it closely, right? So the syntax, the structure of the sentence helps enhance that. That's an example of syntax. Okay, moving on. Drying the hills and nerves to a flashpoint. So this wind is powerful. It's coming. We're like, dun, dun, dun. We're like, what's this wind gonna do? We have this kind of creepy mood already, right? For a few days now, we will see smoke back in the canyons and hear sirens in the night. I have neither heard nor read that a Santa Ana is due, but I know it, and almost everyone I have seen today knows it too. We know it because we feel it. The baby frets, the maid sulks. I rekindle a waning argument with the telephone company, then cut my losses and lie down, given over to whatever it is in the air. To live with the Santa Ana is to accept, consciously or unconsciously, a deeply mechanistic view of human behavior. All right, so far we see topics, the Santa Ana winds, and we would file that under nature, right? It's a weather event that happens in this part of the country. I don't know if you guys have experience with this or not. For us, I think we can associate this with like the hurricane prep, how we're always watching it. In this case, it's actually not something that you see though on the radar, right? She says, I don't know. I haven't read that a Santa Ana wind is coming. I feel it, and everyone kind of feels it, which is really creepy, right? Usually we know that animals can sense maybe a pressure drop before a major storm like a hurricane, and they'll start acting weird. They'll start, taking cover in trees and whatnot, and we can kind of gauge by their behavior that something is up. But this is kind of atypical in that the humans are feeling it too. So there's kind of a suspenseful mood for us. We're like, ooh, what's going to happen next, right? And also this isn't like it's not like we're waiting on a rainbow or something beautiful and exciting, right? The Santa Ana winds seem, again, a little bit creepy, perhaps dangerous, right? Smoke, they're causing fires in the canyons because it's so dry. They hear sirens, it probably responding to the fires. So this isn't something that you're necessarily excited about, but it's kind of exciting in the same way that, waiting on a hurricane can be kind of exciting. Like you're curious, right? It's like the train wreck you can't stop watching. So it's that kind of a situation with these winds. The last sentence, I know that there's a question about this in your assignment, a deeply mechanistic view of human behavior. What does that mean to be mechanistic? Part of a mechanism, right? That you are not acting alone as a single separate unit or being, that your behavior is actually related or caused by other environmental forces that are outside of your control. Some people ponder this and they feel freed by it. They think, oh, it's kind of like the personality myth podcast that we heard, right? That you are not really entirely you. You don't always have control over your reactions, and who you are and who you think you are largely just responses that are happening to your environment that you're not consciously aware of or doing in your mind, right? So for some people, again, to think, oh, I don't have the free will I thought I had, can be freeing. You feel more able to enjoy or just observe whatever's happening, and everything isn't so personal, right? That's the view that I like to take. And then some people feel very disconcerted. They feel very uncomfortable when they start to think about how little freedom or free will they actually have. They're like, whoa, this is like trippy. I feel out of control. I feel, totally like I can't control anything. Again, I try to persuade you not to take that viewpoint, to take the former, where you feel a sense of freedom. Things aren't as personal as they seem. You might not have as much control as you think, and that can be kind of eye-opening and enlightening, right? So that's what she means by a deeply mechanistic view of human behavior. We thought that, oh, I'm in a bad mood and I'm taking it out on so-and-so and they deserve it, and we get so wrapped up in our feelings, right? But she's saying, that's not being generated by you. Maybe the environment is having some impact, right? Like the winds. Maybe they're impacting our behavior. Okay, moving on. The winds are coming. She feels it. Other people feel it. People are acting weird, right? We're moving on to paragraph 2. I recall being told when I first moved to Los Angeles and was living on an isolated beach that the Indians would throw themselves into the sea when the bad wind blew. I could see why. The Pacific turned ominously glossy during a Santa Ana period, and one woke in the night troubled not only by the peacocks screaming in the olive trees, but by the eerie absence of surf. The heat was surreal. The sky had a yellow cast, the kind of light sometimes called earthquake weather. My only neighbor would not come out of her house for days, and there were no lights at night, and her husband roamed the place with a machete. One day, he would tell me that he had heard a trespasser, the next, a rattlesnake. All right, so things, she's upping the creepy level here when it comes to the mood, the suspense that she's creating. This paragraph suggests a few things must be true of the winds. She says legend has it that the Indians would become suicidal. The local Native Americans who lived in this region would become suicidal when the bad winds, the Santa Ana winds, began to blow. This suggests that the effect that the Santa Ana winds are having on human behavior are not due to something with modern humans. It's not something that's come up over time. It's something that's always been true of these winds, that they have an effect, a negative effect usually, on human behavior. Not only human behavior, but human psychology, right? The mental state of people. That's pretty trippy. That's pretty, I don't know, unsettling to think, right? That these winds are coming, you have no control over them, and they might make you crazy to the point of committing suicide. What? That's intense, right? That these winds are like magical voodoo casting a spell over people. Okay, so we have the Indians mentioned. It's not only the Indians, it's not only people, it's also animals. Animals start to lose it too, right? The peacocks are screaming in the olive trees, going nuts. So we see that the winds are affecting every living being, right? Pretty powerful. And she also observes, her neighbor and her neighbor's husband and their behavior, that they might be hallucinating. He's roaming with a machete. It seems like total anarchy and chaos is breaking out when these winds begin to blow. So, something to be afraid of, not so much because the winds are so powerful, they'll blow you, they'll destroy things. No, there's something unseen, which to me makes it even creepier, even scarier, right? This is like the stuff that horror movies are made of, and it's real. Okay, moving on. Paragraph 3, the last paragraph. On nights like that, Raymond Chandler once wrote about the Santa Ana, every booze party ends in a fight. Meek little wives feel the edge of the carving knife and study their husbands' necks. Anything can happen. Again, people lose their minds, right? That was the kind of wind it was. I did not know then that there was any basis for the effect it had on all of us, but it turns out to be another of those cases in which science bears out folk wisdom. Okay, that phrase, science bears out folk wisdom. That means people have observed the effects of these winds over time, and there's folklore, there are myths, people tell stories about things that happened, right? When the winds begin to blow. To say that science bears out folk wisdom means that scientists have studied, with various experiments, data, these winds, and the science proves that yes, something is happening. Right? This isn't made up. This isn't totally fiction. We have studied it. Something is going on here. I don't know. I'm trying to think off the top of my head if there's another situation like that where science bears out or proves that there's something true to folk wisdom. I don't know. Let me know if you come up with something, and I'll let you know if I think of something between now and the end of the video. But I'm sure there are other instances where it's like, myth, folklore, stories, and then, oh yeah, there's actually something to it, right? So she's going to tell us a little bit about the scientific findings here. The Santa Ana, which is named for one of the canyons it rushes through, is Föhn wind, like the Föhn of Austria and Switzerland and the Hamsin of Israel. There are a number of persistent, malevolent winds, perhaps the best known of which are the Mistral of France and the Mediterranean Sirocco. But a Föhn wind has distinct characteristics. It occurs on the leeward slope of a mountain range, and although the air begins as a cold mass, it is warmed as it comes down the mountain and appears finally as a hot, dry wind. Okay, so thus begins the introduction to this kind of scientific diction, this scientific language, right? So of course we've transitioned to talking about science. So we're seeing phrases like the air mass, right? The leeward slope. So this kind of academic language has entered, whereas before, up until now, it's been, personal anecdotes and more casual conversational language, right? Now that she's moved into discussing science, we can see that she's using that type of terminology, right? To prove, to show us that, yeah, there's data on this. All right, so it has a particular name, the phone wind. And I don't know, I think she's also trying to point out the fact that just because we know what type of wind it is doesn't make it any less disturbing, right? So she puts a name to it. It's this type of a wind, the phone wind, leeward slope, etc. And I'm still like, but it's still nuts, right? It's still intense, it's still creepy. So I think she's kind of pointing that out too. Just because we have a name for it doesn't mean we know what it is, right? All right, let's keep reading here. Okay, it appears finally as a hot, dry wind. Whenever and wherever phone blows, doctors hear about headaches and nausea and allergies, about nervousness, about depression. In Los Angeles, some teachers do not attempt to conduct formal classes during a Santa Ana because the children become unmanageable. In Switzerland, the suicide rate goes up during the phone, and in the courts of some Swiss cantons, the wind is considered a mitigating circumstance for crime. Surgeons are said to watch the wind because blood does not clot normally during a phone. A few years ago, an Israeli physicist discovered that not only during such winds, but for the 10 or 12 hours which precede them, the air carries an unusually high ratio of positive to negative ions. Okay, so pause. She's gone through a list of parts of society and people in these parts of society that are affected by the winds. I don't think it's a coincidence that the parts of society that she names are human-made, man-made institutions that we usually associate with law and order and learning and knowledge, and that we usually look to for guidance during times of a crisis, right? Think about now with the COVID-19, pandemic going on. Who are we looking to give us information, to take care of us when we can't leave our homes? We're looking to the government, local, state, and national level. We're looking to educators or people who are knowledgeable in the field, doctors and scientists, to help us out, to give us the latest data, right? To tell us what to do. She's saying that during this weather event, during this phenomena, those people are at a loss also. Those people are also like, what the heck, and throwing up their hands and sort of having to give in, give themselves over, give control over to the wind itself. They have also lost control during this time, right? And that is a pretty intense statement to say that all of our best and strongest man-made institutions also cave during this time. No one can help you. You're on your own with the force of these winds, something you can't even see. That's terrifying, right? It's like, why haven't I heard about this before? That's nuts. Again, total anarchy and chaos reigns during the time of these winds, apparently, and no one knows why. So pretty scary to think that something in our environment might be controlling our minds, our behavior, the very things that we think we definitely have control over no matter what. She's saying, not so much. And even the strongest among us, our doctors, our scientists, our nurses, our teachers, our government officials, they're stuck too. They're at a loss too. Pretty trippy. Okay, moving on. Physicists noticed positive and negative ions. The balance was out of whack, right? That's where we are now. No one seems to know exactly why that should be. Some talk about friction and others suggest solar disturbances. In any case, the positive ions are there, and what an excess of positive ions does in the simplest terms is make people unhappy. One cannot get much more mechanistic than that. And that's where she ends it. So it leaves us with some questions, right? And I ask you these questions in your assignment. And, I don't want to give too much of my own thoughts away. I wish we could have a discussion about it in real time. But I do ask, if it's true that human behavior is mechanistic, which science proves to some extent that yes, it is. Our behaviors, the things that we think are choices that feel like we're choosing to do, are actually based on cause and effect interactions and reactions that are going on in our brain at a very, basic or even cellular level that we can observe, that we're not conscious of. But it feels like we're making a conscious choice, right? So it raises questions about free will. Do we even have it, or is it always an illusion? Are we always just acting in relation to whatever's going on in our brains that we're not even aware of or doing, right? What are humans? We tend to have this view of ourselves as being separate entities, capable of making our own decisions, capable of acting in unique and individual ways. Are we even separate from the universe itself, right? Are we even separate from natural forces, or are we a natural force that has self-aggrandized itself to be something else, right? Are we literally connected on a cellular level to our surroundings? We see ourselves as separate from them because we're like, no, this is my body, this is my skin. Obviously, there's a barrier between, me and my environment. But this would suggest that not so much. There's some kind of symbiotic relationship. There's some kind of flow of energy or literal particles, right, between our self, our bodies, our brains, and the environment, which is creepy. Like, we think of ourselves as like a fish in a fishbowl in the water, separate from that. We have this barrier, that's our skin, that's our body, but maybe not, right? So these are things to ponder that aren't woo-woo. I think that these are legitimate things to be thinking about, and science is starting to prove that the views that we have of ourselves as separate entities are not quite accurate. So I'll leave you with those things to think about. Hopefully that helped you do your assignment and have a better understanding of the text. Pretty interesting stuff. All right, guys, I'll catch you later. See you soon. Bye.